The second one, this is from Pat Ryan. Pat asks, what is the best process to end the Fed? Should it be gradual or sudden?
This is a good question, and it can vary. We have a little experience in our history of ending central banks. We had a first national bank and a second national bank, each lasting 20 years in our early history, and they were ended suddenly, but they weren't as intrusive. They didn't run the economy. They didn't fix day-to-day interest rates. But Jefferson ended the first the first national bank, and Jackson ended the second one. And then, of course, we had the abuse of the system with the Civil War, with Lincoln, getting off the gold standard and allowing the greenbacks to be printed, and with the chaos of the Civil War and the bad economy following this, they decided there still was a belief, a prevailing attitude still existed, that you had to have gold backing the money. So in 1875, they passed a bill which was called the Resumption Act, and it was very smooth. For 3 years, they gradually quit printing greenbacks. They spent less money. They balanced budget more so, and there was confidence placed in believing what governments would say. And when in 1878, when the actual conversion from paper money to gold was there, which reintroduced the gold standard, it came pretty smoothly, and it was not a big event. Those conditions don't exist today because the Federal Reserve has become the main engine of economic planning, the engine of inflationism, and sets the condition for all the problems that we face, because the system is so dependent on the Fed, whether it's the welfare state or whether it's the warfare state, and all the financial markets are very dependent on the Federal Reserve. So I would say that it's very unlikely, and I do not advise it, saying, if I had the keys, just take it and close the doors and it's over and done with, like they did in the past. It would not be acceptable. The person that did that would probably have a shorter life than otherwise. But it's always going to be difficult. So I would say that you can't close it down until you get rid of some of the dependency on the Federal Reserve. And my argument here was, instead of saying that we will end the Federal Reserve on day certain, is that to say that what we do, we should have a transition period where we phase out the spending. But what we could have are the legalization of competing currencies, and that notion has been growing. As a matter of fact, it has introduced the notion, could it be possible that the cryptocurrencies may facilitate this? And there's still a lot of questions out. I still have questions about it, whether that will work, because I have spent a lifetime thinking about sun money being something that cannot be created out of thin air, and that means the precious metals. And the only thing I have going for me on that is 6,000 years of history. But that doesn't mean that you should be locked into saying that nothing else could facilitate. So the cryptocurrencies may help, but I do believe in competing currencies. And if there is a competition between private fiat and gold and silver backing, I'd let it happen. The main rule is that you cannot have permit fraud. Our government has, brought us to the doorstep of bankruptcy with the fiat currency and debt and fraud, because they promise things and they defraud the money and they debase the currency, and that is all based on fraud. So I would argue the case that you should work for a gradual transition, but I also work on the assumption it probably is not going to work that way. Yeah, what I spoke about was in a way theoretical and hoping that we could come to our senses. But the odds of us gradually reducing spending and doing what we did in 1875, very, very slim chance of that happening. So I think the Fed will end dramatically, and what will happen is they will lose, whether the doors are totally closed, but they will have to change their opinion and their power to regulate the supply of money and regulate from minute to minute the currency exchange rates as well as interest rates. That will have to end. You could do that with a remnant of the central bank existing, but you certainly would have to get the intellectual support for this, and the financial community would have to agree to it. Now, if if nothing like that is done and it ends badly and it just collapses, that would be the collapse of the dollar. That would be the most dangerous thing to do. So the sudden ending with a financial crisis and the collapse of the dollar is the thing that we should try our best to avoid. But quite frankly, it's a potential that I sort of dread. We're not on the doorstep of that happening, but it could come up under the conditions that we exist today, because what holds the conditions together so often are subjective thinking about, oh yeah, we can trust it, we're rich, we're the powerhouse of the world, and we have the military, so nothing is going to destroy the great empire of America. Well, empires come to an end, and when they do, their currency usually goes with it. So I spend my time trying to avoid the catastrophic end of a system like this. Although I want it to end, it could be done more smoothly. And of course, I think the odds of that happening are pretty slim.